Dr. Rob Tyser grew up in a small rural community in southeastern Nebraska, in a family that valued camping, farming, and other outdoor activities. He has served as a faculty member in the Department of Biology at UW-La Crosse, where his favorite courses were ecology, evolution, and ornithology. Since retirement, Rob has been active in local sustainability organizations and in the Mississippi Valley Conservancy. He's a member of First Congregational Church and participates in a small Buddhist study group. I got to meet Rob while he was working tirelessly at UWL to improve sustainability on the campus. I'm really glad that his talk today can highlight, and also on December 3rd, some of the quantitative and reasoning aspects of our humanist background that Reverend Bruce introduced last week. And so we'll have some practical applications for lessening our impact on the climate. Thank you so much for being with us, Rob, both of these Sundays.
Okay. Thanks, Alyssa. Have to mention when you were talking about biking, I flashed back to when I was a kid in southeastern Nebraska. My parents convinced me that having a paper route would be really nice, and I agreed. So I delivered papers for 5 years. Next to teaching, that's probably the longest profession I've ever engaged in, is delivering papers. And my parents convinced my sisters to have paper routes too. So we all had paper routes, and I can still remember delivering papers. Oh, thanks. When it was cold out, we had a rule in our house, had a number of rules, but one of them was when the temperature was 0 degrees outside, we got to be taken on our paper route in the car. But until then, we had to deliver the paper by hand. And I used a bicycle. My paper route started at 7 blocks from my house. So I loaded the papers in the bags, pedaled. If it's 10 degrees outside, I said, oh, geez, I wish it was colder. It wasn't. So I don't know why that just flashed back to me. We're talking about carbon footprinting. Today, we're going to focus on the basic question, why do it, and maybe focus on your congregation as a focal point. 2 weeks from today, we'll focus on household carbon footprints. And I probably will forget to mention this, but if you can remember if you decide to come 2 weeks from now, if you remember to go online to your energy provider's website, I imagine for most of you that would be Xcel Energy, and establish your own account. You need a bill with your account number, but you get a password and give your email and all of that. Once you do that, you can sign on and you can monitor your monthly energy bills, yearly energy bill. I think it goes back for 3 years or so. And the things I'll be talking about today require getting down into the weeds a little bit like that. So if you remember to do that before next week, and just familiarize yourself with the information that's on the website, that would be helpful. Okay, so the topic for today is carbon footprinting. Why do it? What is it? I think we all realize that carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere are increasing. They're increasing quite a bit, actually. In this graph, over here is the concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. This is a timeline going from almost 1 million years ago on up to the present. And these red dots here are carbon dioxide levels. So they cycle around a bit, more or less coinciding with recent ice ages, but they average around 250 parts per million until we get to around 1960, and then they, boom, go up remarkably. This is in 2021, 415 parts per million is probably 420 some parts per million now. This spike, if you put it in perspective, is extraordinarily unusual. And even if you look at the broader geological record, as far back as we have data for, or good estimates for, this spike is unprecedented. So something is going on that's remarkable. And Homo sapiens, our species, is, this is new for us. obviously, too. This is new territory. And you probably also realize that carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, as well as some other greenhouse gases, are causing climate temperatures, global temperatures to increase. Using this as an average, which is more or less around 1950, we are now about 2 degrees Fahrenheit warmer on the average across the planet. 2 degrees doesn't sound like much, but it has a heck of an impact on ecosystems, which are finely tuned to temperatures and can be remarkably changed with even small changes in temperature. So climate changes, climate temperatures are definitely increasing. That's not unusual. I think we all know about that. Sources of CO2 emissions, carbon dioxide is a primary culprit here. Coal, oil, gas, natural gas, propane. What do all these have in common other than they emit CO2 when they're burned? What kind of chemicals, substances are these? They're all what? Fossil fuels. They're all fossil fuels. Fossil fuels are the primary culprit here. So carbon dioxide levels have increased quite a bit, and you might think, oh, it's too late. Well, it is unfortunate that we waited this long, but the point I want to make here is, even though carbon dioxide levels have increased quite a bit, it's still important to act and act forcefully as we can, as quickly as we can. So I have 3 graphs here. The first one here is carbon dioxide emissions for the entire planet. Right now, they're about 9 gigatons of carbon per year, all countries combined. If somehow we stopped at this level right here in 2023 and maintain that level of carbon pollution, which would be remarkable if we could just put on the brakes and stop right here. If we were able to do this, the CO2 concentration in our atmosphere would still continue to rise a lot. We're producing more than the Earth can accommodate now, and that would continue to happen. How would that affect temperature? Well, temperature would continue to rise. That's if we could just stop right where we're at. A more reasonable scenario, even I would say a more hopeful scenario, would be to put the brakes on as quickly as we can. It might take us 50 years or so, but to decrease our emissions by a factor of 4 or 5. What effect would that have? CO2 levels would still rise, but they'd more or less level off. The Earth can accommodate a certain amount of carbon dioxide and absorb it in soil and water. Temperatures will continue to rise, but then they would level off too. So the point here is, even though we've mucked up quite a bit, there's still hope, and there's reason to take action. Let's put it that way. It makes sense to take action as quickly as we can to decrease our carbon emissions. Okay, so who are the, quote, culprits? Here are the world leaders in terms of carbon dioxide pollution. This is the amount of carbon dioxide that each nation produces. I've picked out 4 geographical areas of the world. The red line here is China. China's carbon footprint started going up in the early 1970s, and they're really shooting up now. China is, their standard of living is increasing quite a bit, and their consumption is increasing quite a bit too. They are the world leader, so to speak, in this respect. If you look at Europe, this is the blue-gray line. They started out with the Industrial Revolution, leading the way in the 1700s, peaked around 1975, early 1970s, but their carbon emissions have declined a fair amount since then. And if you look at India, they're coming on board now. Their standard of living is increasing, so their carbon footprint is rising rapidly, and probably will continue to do so for the time being. United States, the blue line here, has risen, but we've dropped off a fair amount since 1980s or so. So, you know, we're all in this together, but some countries are producing more than others. Kind of makes us feel a little bit self-righteous or condemning, right? Well, China is apparently taking this quite seriously. Their Green industries, solar panels, windmills are leading the world. They're really putting a lot of effort into climate change. And there's reason to assume that perhaps their carbon footprint will start to decline in the not too distant future. Okay, but let's take a look at the amount of CO2 that's been emitted since the Industrial Revolution started. These are various countries here. China has emitted about 250,000 metric tons of CO2 since the 1750s. They are leading the pack right now, but if you look at the accumulated amount of CO2 in the atmosphere, they're way behind us. We've contributed a heck of a lot of CO2 in the atmosphere. We have the largest footprint right now if you look at the concentration of CO2 in the atmosphere. Here are other countries if you're interested. Here's another statistic I think that's very telling. This is the carbon footprint per person in various countries. Even now, China's, quote, leading the way, but per person, they're producing half the CO2 that we are per person. So if you look at China, you might say they're the bad guys, but there's a different way to look at it. This to me is most telling. I think it's incumbent on us to do something about what we're doing, and we'll keep our fingers crossed about China and other countries as well. There is good news, looking at it from the US's standpoint. The Biden administration has passed two remarkable big pieces of legislation in the past several years that provide strong incentives for decreasing our carbon footprint. You've all heard about incentives for solar panels, electric cars, things like that, agricultural innovations for capturing carbon in the soil as farmers farm and that sort of thing. So there's strong governmental incentives. These are brand new. We've never done this before in the United States. The use of coal is dropping dramatically, coal for power plants primarily. And coal is extraordinarily dirty in terms of CO2 production. We're burning more natural gas, which is cleaner. It's still producing CO2, but we're burning much less coal, which is a good thing. The use of wind and solar technology is rising rapidly, very rapidly. If you look at Xcel Energy, about 30% of the electricity that Xcel generates now comes from wind and solar, which is a good thing. Electricity power providers are climbing on board and trying to reduce their carbon footprint, which is good. So the result, as we looked at before, is our carbon footprint in the United States is going down. So that's good. It needs to go down further, but we've made a good attempt at this so far. Okay, so let's say we as individuals or as churches or as industries do want to lower our carbon footprint. How do we do it? How do we go about doing this? I happened to catch this piece on NPR a couple of weeks ago, individual actions you can take to address climate change. And they listed, I don't know, a dozen or more. Use air conditioning properly, upgrade your furnace to a heat pump. Looking at Dale back there. Keep your home safe from smoke. I'm not sure what that exactly means, but that was mentioned. Switch to electric cooking, switch from gas cooking to electric cooking. Eat more sustainably, blah, blah, blah. So here are a list of fine actions to take, but here's the question I always ask when I see these well-meaning lists. What's really impactful? How to think about this logically. If you want to make a difference, how do you really do it? Do you do these things blindly and keep your fingers crossed, or do you approach it more with your eyes open with some data in hand? That's the most important question that I'd like to leave you with. What's the most impactful thing that we can do as a congregation or as individuals? So if you had to make a choice from this list, what do you think would be the most impactful? I'm curious. If you had to choose one. It's up for debate, but my choice would be right here. Dale, Dale mentioned that he's used 40% less natural gas by switching to a heat pump. That's a big difference just by altering your heating system a bit in your house. To me, that would be one that I would look at. Okay, yeah. Maybe you don't cool your house as much as you would be inclined to. I don't know. Like have it checked. We keep our temperature at 79 degrees, which some people would say is a little warm, but I don't think it's about right for us. Clean it, yeah. Keep it in good working condition. Sure. Yeah.
Well, one thing that I see in my neighborhood and I'm living in a newer development is people don't open their windows when it's cool outside.
Yeah.
They get the cool air.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what you need to do.
Yeah. 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 Yeah, I hear you. I agree. I'm a member of the Congregational Church. I'm not a great churchgoer, just to be quite frank. I organize religion. I'm wrestling with issues there, but I am a member of the church, and they're good people there, and I enjoy their company. We took a look at our carbon footprint 2 years ago, and we use this website to do it, Cool Congregations. You can do a Google search on that, pick it up. It's really easy to find. On the menu here, there is a drop-down list, and there's one option that says carbon calculator for your church. So we did make an attempt to calculate our church's carbon footprint. And when you go to this website, you're asked to provide data that pertain to your electricity and natural gas usage, transportation, your church staff doing their work, how many miles do they drive, et cetera, food served at the church during our potlucks, et cetera, et cetera. And this is what our first estimate of our annual carbon footprint is in terms of metric tons of carbon dioxide gases. So this is how much metric tons in terms of our facility, electricity, natural gas, other things, transportation, the food that we serve in the church and consume, the stuff we buy, paper, equipment, that sort of thing. So it's pretty clear. If you want to make a difference in our church, you don't consume less paper. You don't, that would be good. You don't serve food that's a little bit more carbon friendly. That would be good. But if you really want to make a difference, if you really are serious about this, it's really clear. You got to look at this. These are important things, but if you want to be logical about it, do this. Same thing with our houses. If you want to make a difference in your household carbon dioxide consumption, figure out where your big consumers are, big producers of carbon dioxide are. It might be in this area too. So we know what we're up against here. We did make a decision. We worked with Xcel Energy. We signed up for their Renewable Connect program. And is anybody familiar with that here? I imagine some of you are, but does anybody actually? Pardon? This program? It's been available for a number of years, like 5-10 years. Yeah. Yeah. If you have another electricity provider like Riverland or Vernon Electric, they have a similar program. So we signed up, and the way these programs work is these electricity providers dump an equivalent amount of your electricity into the grid, and they guarantee that that electricity comes from sustainable sources, wind and solar. And there is an official way to do that that's accepted by many states and electricity providers all across the country. The EPA advocates this. It's called renewable energy certificates. We signed up. The interesting thing about this is it wasn't that expensive. It's $100 or no, actually about $80 a month for us to do that. For individual households, the average would be about $7 or $8 a month. And by doing that, this goes away. This carbon footprint drops down. That's about 70 metric tons we saved just literally overnight. So in terms of things to do that are easy to do, we decided that that's what we're going to do. Now we're looking at some other options as well, including putting solar panels on our roof. So that's my presentation. It's not all that complicated or technical, but the basic question is, what do you want for your church? Is there strong interest here in reducing your carbon footprint? I imagine there probably is. What's the way to do it? What's the best strategy?